You know, I never thought a simple trip to the corner market in Brooksville would turn my whole world upside down. But there I was, Sarah Jenkins, just a regular single mom, hustling through the parking lot with my little girl Emily in tow, juggling bags of groceries, and thinking about what to whip up for dinner, maybe some mac and cheese to keep things easy after a long day. Then, out of nowhere, this wild-eyed guy bursts from behind a truck, yelling something incoherent, his hand shaking as he points a gun straight at this tiny kid standing by the carts, frozen like a deer in headlights, her pigtails bouncing slightly from the shock. Without even a second to think, pure instinct kicking, Ine shoved Emily behind the nearest car, hollering for her to stay down, and lunged forward, wrapping my arms around that stranger's daughter just as the shot cracked through the air, ripping into my side like fire, and everything went blurry with pain and chaos. Man, that moment replayed in my head 1,000 times afterward, the sting in my ribs, the little girl's sobs muffled against my chest, Emily's screams cutting through the panic as shoppers scattered like leaves in a storm, nobody stepping up because fear's a powerful thing, you know? I held on tight, whispering to her that it was going to be okay, even as blood soaked my shirt, and the shooter, some lowlife named Vince, as I later learned, with a grudge against the girl's dad over some old turf war in the biker scene, stumbled back, his face twisting in regret, or maybe just surprised that he'd actually pulled the trigger, before he bolted to a waiting car that peeled out like it was in a bad action flick. The cops showed up eventually, sirens wailing, but in that frozen aftermath, with Emily clutching my hand and the world spinning, I couldn't help but wonder who the hell would have my back now, after I'd thrown myself into someone else's mess. The quiet type who'd spent years scraping by on waitressing tips, avoiding drama like the plague, suddenly bleeding out for a kid I didn't even know. Lying in that hospital bed the next morning, hooked up to beeps and IVs, the pain throbbing like a bad hangover, I felt Emily's tiny hand in mine, her eyes puffy from crying all night. And that's when he walked in, Jake Harlan, the girl's dad, this towering guy in leather and ink, his beard flecked with gray, looking like he'd ridden straight out of a Western, but his eyes, oh, they were raw, filled with that mix of fury and gratitude that hits you deep. "You took a bullet for my Sophie," he said, voice gravelly, not accusatory, but like he was stating a fact that changed everything. And I managed a weak shrug, wincing as I did, told him I couldn't just stand there, not when a child's life was on the line, because if it was Emily, I'd hope someone would do the same. He paced a bit, boots thudding on the tile, then leaned in close. "Where I come from with the Iron Rider suite, don't forget debts like that. Your family now, whether you signed up for it or not." And there was this weight to his words, not some empty promise, but forged in the kind of loyalty that comes from losing too much already. Turns out, Jake had lost Sophie's mom to a hit-and-run years back, tied to the same rival gang nonsense that brought Vince gunning for his kid, a power play over some backroad territories the Riders controlled. Word spread fast in Brooksville, a small town where everyone knows your business before you do. Folks at the diner whispering about the crazy mom who jumped in front of a gun, some calling it heroic, others reckless, like I'd dragged Emily into danger out of some misguided savior complex. And yeah, it stung, especially when I'd catch neighbors staring from their porches. Phones out like I was some sideshow. Emily asked me one night, over homework at the kitchen table, why I did it, her voice small, uncertain, and I told her straight, because sometimes the right thing hurts, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat, for Sophie, for her, for any kid caught in the crossfire of grown-up stupidity. But the real storm hit a few nights later, when we were finally home, trying to reclaim normalcy with hot cocoa and cartoons. The window shattered in a crash that made my blood run cold, glass flying everywhere as Emily screamed, and this voice snarled from outside, "Stay out of Rider business next time, or we'll aim lower." It was Vince's crew. I knew it, retaliating because my act had blown up their plan, exposing their beef over those disputed lands where the Riders ran protection for local farms against bigger corporate bullies trying to muscle in. I froze for a second, heart pounding, rage bubbling up. How dare they come after us, after a mom and her kid, just because I'd ruined their petty revenge? But before I could even dial 911, the roar started, low at first, then building like thunder, engines revving as dozens of Iron Riders flooded the street, headlights piercing the night, and Jake burst through the door. his face a mask of controlled fury, barking orders to his guys who fanned out like a human shield. "Who the hell thinks they can touch what's ours?" he growled at the shadows, and one of his riders spotted a fleeing figure, but Jake held them back smart, not wanting escalation in front of Emily, who was trembling in my arms. He knelt down to her level, voice softening just a touch. "Hey kiddo, nobody messes with you anymore, promise." And she nodded, wide-eyed, as the riders patched up the window with boards, standing guard through the night. Their presence this unbreakable wall that made me realize, for the first time, that maybe leaning on others wasn't weakness, especially when the alternative was facing down thugs alone. Things escalated from there, the town buzzing with tension, parents at Emily's school gossiping about the biker mom, some pulling their kids away like we were contagious, driven by that old community fear of anything rough around the edges, ignoring how the riders had quietly kept drug pushers out of Brooksville for years. But Jake? He didn't back down. One morning, as Emily and I headed to school, nerves raw from the stairs, the engines rolled up again 50 strong this time, forming a convoy that turned heads and silenced whispers. Sophie skipping alongside Emily, the two girls linking arms like old friends. At the gates, with parents gaping, Jake stepped forward, his voice booming but calm. "She saved my girl from a coward's bullet, now we stand for hers." End of story. And you could feel the shift, the reluctant nods from folks who'd judged too quick, realizing this wasn't intimidation, it was justice and leather, countering the HOA types who'd always looked down on the riders as outlaws, when really, they were the ones protecting the little guy from land grabs and greed. The trial was the real showdown. Vince in cuffs, smirking at first like he owned the room, his lawyer grilling me on the stand about why I'd recklessly endangered my own child, dripping with sarcasm. "Weren't you just playing hero to impress the bad boys?" And I fired back, voice steady despite the knot in my gut. "I was being a mom, protecting a scared kid from your client's grudge over dirt and dollars. If that's reckless, then guilty as charged." The courtroom hushed, especially with the riders packing the benches, their stares like daggers, and Vince's cocky grin faded when the judge hammered down the sentence: years behind bars for attempted murder, fueled by that twisted rivalry where he'd lost big on a land deal the riders had blocked. Walking out, flanked by Jake and the crew, engines purring like victory, I slipped on the vest they'd given me, stitched with kin on the back, feeling that bond solidify not just protection, but a chosen family that had my back when the world didn't. Life settled after that, quieter but stronger. Emily walking to school with Sophie, no more looking over shoulders, the town easing into a wary respect, though some still muttered about outlaw influence. Jake and I shared coffee one dawn at the local spot, him opening up about the loneliness of single parenting amid the chaos, me admitting how scared I'd been, but how it all taught me that real family isn't blood, it's who shows up when the bullets fly. Yet, looking back, I can't help but wonder if jumping in that day stirred up more than it solved. Did it pull us deeper into a cycle of feuds? Or was it the spark that finally broke it? What do you think? Was it worth the risk? Or should folks mind their own in a world full of grudges? Drop a comment below. Share your take on justice, loyalty, or those community clashes that hit close to home. I read every one. And hey, if this story got you thinking, hit subscribe and that bell, because real tales like this, they remind us we're all just one moment away from changing everything.